In the letter, Randolph Scott admitted everything. He leaves behind that alters everything. Randolph Scott came into being. Especially in the Western genre, George Randolph Scott, born January 23, 1898 in Orange County, Virginia, became one of Hollywood's most durable and iconic performers. From the silent film era of the 1920s to the late 1960s, his career covered, he grew to be a cherished icon of austere valor and American manhood. Scott was more than simply a performer. He embodied a particular American cultural ideal, one marked by power, honor, and a rough sense of individualism. His legacy lives on not just in his movies, but also in the many honors given to him by those who labored with him and the millions who appreciated his work. Randolph Scott was raised in Charlotte, North Carolina, from a well-off family. While his mother, Lucille Crane Scott, oversaw the home and brought up Randolph with his siblings, his father, George Grant Scott, was a qualified public accountant. The family was socially well-connected, which allowed Scott a pleasant upbringing with access to excellent education and possibilities. He went to private schools and eventually signed up for Georgia Institute of Technology, where he momentarily chased engineering. His studies, though, were halted by World War I. Scott joined the U.S. Army during World War I and served in France with the 2nd Trench Mortar Battalion. Though he never witnessed severe battle, his military background gave him discipline and maturity that would form his character both on and off the screen. Following the conflict, Scott came back home valuing the ideals of service, dignity, and patriotism. Particularly in the westerns for which he became renowned, these qualities would subsequently shape many of the parts he assumed in his film career. Scott came back to North Carolina following the war, but he quickly grew uneasy. He was attracted to the growing film sector in Hollywood, which was fast turning the entertainment center of the world. Scott relocated to California in the early 1920s to follow an acting career. Encouraged by his father, he signed up for acting courses and started off as a bit player and extra in silent movies. His tall build, appealing appearance, and innate agility drew immediate notice, and he found consistent work in little parts. His break came when he met director Cecil B. DeMille, one of Hollywood's most powerful filmmakers at the time. Scott's attitude delighted DeMille, who cast him in a number of early sound films' tiny but important parts. These performances increased Scott's visibility, and soon he was cast in bigger supporting parts. His early work in movies like The Virginian, 1929, and The Last Roundup, 1934, revealed his promise as a leading actor, especially in westerns, where his inherent cowboy-like presence appeared just right. When he became one of Hollywood's most bankable actors in Western films, Randolph Scott's career really took off in the 1930s and 1940s. Starring in a run of successful westerns that confirmed his status as the ideal cowboy hero, he fast discovered his niche in the genre. Movies including Last of the Mohicans, 1936, Jesse James, 1939, and Western Union, 1941, helped make him among the most well-liked performers of his era. His rough attractiveness and tall athletic frame mixed with his quiet, consistent attitude made him the perfect representation of the Western hero. Scott's capacity to add depth and complexity to what may have otherwise been straightforward, one-dimensional parts distinguished him from other Western performers of the time. Often ethically complicated guys, his characters had to negotiate challenging circumstances, making him a human and sympathetic hero. He didn't play colorful or boisterous characters. Rather, he offered a quiet firmness and stoicism to his performances that connected with people. Reflecting the conventional American virtues of hard effort, tenacity, and honesty, his characters were men of little words but big action. Randolph Scott's career had most notably major period in the 1950s, when he started collaborating with director Bud Boetticher. Their collaboration produced a number of westerns currently considered among the best in the category. Often called the Randolph cycle after the production firm founded by Scott and producer Harry Joe Brown. These movies featured masterpieces like 7 Men from Now, 1956, The Tall T, 1957, and Ride Lonesome, 1959. Lean, character-driven narratives by Boetticher frequently dealt with revenge, atonement, and the stark reality of Old West existence. Playing more mature, world-weary people struggling with their own moral quandaries, Scott's performances in these movies were among the finest of his career. These movies in many respects reflected the apex of Scott's acting career. bringing all his experience and weight to these parts. Scott and Bottcher's cooperation is today considered one of the most successful in Western movie history. Their films have inspired many performers and directors that came after them. Although Randolph Scott's on-screen character was that of a tough, lonely cowboy, his personal life was one of stability and prudence. He married Marion DuPont in 1936, the daughter of rich industrialist William DuPont. Their marriage, though, was brief and they divorced 3 years later. Scott married Patricia Stillman in 1944. Their marriage lasted until his death in 1987. Living a modest private life in Beverly Hills away from the flash and glamour of Hollywood, they adopted 2 kids, Sandra and Christopher. Scott was noted for his strong Christian beliefs. He stayed dedicated to his family and church during his life. Though he was one of the most well-known faces in Hollywood, Scott chose to remain in the background. He seldom attended public events or gave interviews, and he stayed clear of the tabloid scandals and controversies that affected many of his peers. Those who knew him characterized him as a modest, quiet guy, more concerned with his family and pastimes like golf than with celebrity or wealth. Indeed, Scott mostly vanished from the public eye after he quit performing in 1962, opting to spend his last years in quiet retirement. Randolph Scott, who had appeared in over 100 movies, quit acting in 1962 after Ride the High Country was released. This movie is generally considered one of the finest westerns ever produced. Under Sam Peckinpah's direction, Scott's outstanding career was fittingly ended with the movie, which starred Scott with fellow Western legend Joel McCrea. Unlike many performers who battle retirement, Scott welcomed it completely and decided to lead a quiet, private life in Southern California. Scott was an active member of his community after retirement and a passionate golfer who often took part in charitable events. He was also engaged in charitable activities, especially those connected to his Christian religion. Joining the Bel Air Country Club, he relished the calm, unhurried life he had fought so hard to reach. Scott was known to be a private guy, and following his retirement, he mostly stayed out of the public eye. A savvy businessman all his life, he spent his time enjoying his hobbies, golf and managing his money. Randolph Scott, renowned for his austere and tough performances in vintage Western movies, the legendary actor had a lasting impact on Hollywood that still fascinates people even now. Scott's personal life, meanwhile, was full with emotion and contemplation that few really grasped during his life in spite of his on-screen image of a man of few words. In a breathtaking finding, a note he left behind would give a look into the guy behind the cowboy hat and the gunslinger parts, hence providing an unmatched view into his heart and mind. Randolph Scott was the epitome of the ideal Western hero all his life. Tall, thin, and sharp-eyed, he became a symbol of masculinity, strength, and honor. His people were usually persons of integrity, faced the hazards of the frontier with an unrelenting sense of fairness. Scott's career extended over 3 decades, from movies like Ride the High Country to Comanche Station, making him one of the most popular and bankable stars of the Western genre. Scott was notoriously private though, even with his renown and the bigger-than-life image Hollywood created around him. His fans loved him. Still, beyond the rare press photo or public event, nothing was known about his personal life. On and off the screen, he was the sturdy, quiet kind. He hardly spoke, choosing instead to let his work speak for itself. Much of Scott's actual self stayed hence concealed, cloaked in the same mystery that characterized his creations. Years of conjecture surrounding Randolph Scott's personal life. Some Hollywood insiders talked about the actor's relationships, especially his long and close acquaintance with fellow actor Cary Grant. Living together for years in a Malibu beachfront house, Scott and Grant sparked speculations that went from conjecture about their relationship to more intimate inquiries about Scott's sexuality, a topic that was both forbidden and somewhat contentious in Hollywood at the time. Still, Scott never spoke out on these rumors. He stayed silent and kept working on his Western hero image. But behind closed doors, Scott is said to have battled his identity, social expectations, and the strain of keeping a particular image. Scott might have felt bound by the very celebrity that had given him so much success in a time when the movie business sometimes pushed adherence to conventional gender norms and public personas. The world would not get some knowledge of the emotional struggle that had long tormented the actor until after Scott's death in 1987, at the age of 89. Among his belongings was a handwritten letter he left for close friends and family. Succinct but deep, the letter exposed a side of Randolph Scott that no one had ever known. Scott wrote in it that despite the celebrity and love he had gotten from admirers all across the world, he had felt great loneliness all his life. The letter also addressed the intricacies of his relationships, suggesting regrets and lost chances for genuine emotional connection. As a way of safeguarding his private life from public examination, he said he regretted the walls he had erected around himself, both personally and professionally. Scott admitted the cost of celebrity in his efforts to live truthfully. Scott's letter hinted, maybe most painfully, to a desire for a world in which he might have been more honest about who he really was, free from concern of judgment or professional consequences. Though he didn't directly address the rumors about his sexuality or his relationship with Cary Grant, he did mention them. The letter's tone implied Scott had borne the weight of secret for most of his life. His admission was one of profound personal grief, not scandal. A revelation that the persona he had created for public consumption had in many ways kept him from completely accepting his genuine self. Years ago I came upon a picture of Randolph Scott and Cary Grant standing rather close, leaving little question about their bond. Both guys were staring into each other's eyes wearing frilly monogrammed aprons. Randolph Scott's death shocked me greatly since he was a childhood hero. Most likely because A, he wasn't as great a star, and B, as a person, he was more circumspect. There's been somewhat less discussion about Scott's sexuality than there has been about Grant's over the years. But the known facts about Cary Grant leave little question that he was gay, which in turn makes it much more clear that his relationship with Scott was a good lot more than platonic. Grant lived and worked in New York, having moved from the UK, before becoming renowned in Hollywood. He was in a continuous connection with future Hollywood designer Ori Kelly during that time. Kelly recorded it in his autobiography just recently published. As a struggling actor, Grant was also known to get by on the charity of strangers, as Tennessee Williams might have remarked, using his appeal on affluent older guys, not exactly a rent boy but certainly a bit of a gigolo. During his time in Hollywood, Grant was a customer of Hollywood pimp Scotty Bowers, who set up numerous assignations with young males. Grant's early marriages were obviously planned as a cover for his sexuality. At the time, there wasn't even any effort to pretend differently. Grant eventually, like Scott, found comfort in lengthier heterosexual partnerships. But then most gay guys of the era as well. Especially in the public eye, it was what you had to do to survive. For Hollywood stars as well, the arrival of tabloid tell-all journalism in the 1950s made being carefree about one's personal life far more dangerous than it had been in the 30s and 40s. To put it briefly, all the data points to Grant and Scott being lovers without any uncertainty. The life they shared makes me rather happy. It seemed to have been full of love, joy, and happiness. I regret simply that neither of them lived in a period free of consequences. Randolph Scott's note has changed the way the world sees the actor forever. For decades, fans and historians have drawn a portrait of Scott as a plain, tough and direct guy who absolutely represented the Old West ideals. The note, however, exposed a more complicated and nuanced person whose inner life was rife with the same doubts, worries and emotional battles many others have. The letter has also prompted some to reconsider the challenges Hollywood stars of Scott's era experienced. Hollywood's golden age was infamous for its strict enforcement of gender roles.